Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of Overcome Yourself, the podcast. As you know, my name is Nicole, and I'm so excited to be here today with Andrew. Now, Andrew, you are a coach, you're a leadership coach, but you have a very interesting story where you were progressing in your career and then you had to pivot and you had to learn a whole new set of skills. So please introduce yourself, Andrew, and tell us a little bit about your story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nicole, and appreciate you and your audience taking a moment to listen to the story. I hope it offers some value, insights, and inspiration for anybody that is listening. As you mentioned, I am a leadership and executive coach. Currently, I'm the founder of Brave Leadership Guild. Previously to that, I was the VP of People Operations for a top five media company in the automotive industry. And I was at that company for over a decade, and it was amazing. It was a great, fun time, full of, awesome learning and development opportunities for me. It's where I cut my teeth as a professional. I worked my way from the bottom to the top of the organization, starting out as a staff editor. So on the journalism side of the business, working my way to eventually become the VP of People Operations. And, it even looking back on it now, it I have no remorse about the situation. It's just, at a high level, the company, like so many, ran into some economic headwinds that finally caught up after COVID. And ironically enough, as the VP of People Operations, as much as creating a strategic way to develop company culture and a strong bond cross-departmentally, you also have to be in charge of headcount reduction strategies. And that eventually ended with, me and the senior leadership team really having to take a tough look at all the existing positions. And, my position was one of those positions that ultimately, I had to vote on it. And um, in terms of what was in the best interest for the longevity of the organization, I was given an opportunity to stay in a different capacity, but I also looked at that as a personal opportunity to double down on what my passion was, what my passion had been over maybe the last 2.5 years prior to that, leading up to that event. Um, and on one end, it was a turning of the chapter, but it was also a moment where, you hear about this a lot where sometimes people end up having to take that leap. There's that point of no return where you have a dream or a passion, and you really do have to, I know it's cliche, but you really do have to kind of burn the boat sometimes. And you can burn the boats without burning bridges. I will say that. That's also something I'm very passionate about. So I
That's
did
good.
that. I burned the boats on my passion, doubled down, and invested in myself and my vision for how I could help other professionals in this next chapter of my life. And at the same time, did it with all the means in my control to ensure that the people, the partners, and my colleagues, we had an intact relationship as we transitioned through that.
That's powerful because that's a scary, scary junction to find yourself in. So I find that to be like just very incredible, right? And very future focused, right? Because it's very easy for us to get stuck in the moment where you're like, oh my God, I don't have a job anymore. What am I going to do? Versus this is a stepping stone onto something, and I want to make sure that these relationships I can maintain them because in our careers, that's what we leave with, right? We leave with the relationships and the experience that we get, and you never ever know how one of those relationships um might come into play later on. You never know who in that past life, right? Because it feels like a past life, right? Is watching, and you never know what opportunities that can spark. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Andrew. um Talk to me a little bit about, as a leadership coach, about how we handle those big changes. Like, how do you maintain that perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I love helping clients with and non-clients, just people I run into, because I will add, outside of the executive coaching, when I transition, I'm still very much in the middle of building my own practice to a point where I can just have that be what I do. So on the side, I got back into craft brewing, and I work at one of Southern California's oldest craft breweries as an assistant GM right now, and which is which is really awesome because I get to stay integrated into the aspect of work culture and established teams and working within an environment where you have, top to bottom organizational structure. I'm able to also have a proving ground, so to speak, for some of my training and development philosophies. And, this kind of leads into your question. It's even in my past life as a VP of operations and even into now, the fact that I have this endeavor, the most important thing I think we can do as people who are passionate about something and we have a vision that we're currently building is be fully transparent. Take a chance on being fully transparent. I think people will focus and put a lot of pressure on those sorts of situations or conversations going right with stakeholders. I think we can't focus on what's out of our control, right? And how people take that news is kind of outside of our control. But what we can control is how well do we articulate and communicate the importance of this initiative? How well do we block off the time to reflect on why someone might be worried, frustrated, feel like it's a conflict, um, of our time, our potential productivity? How much time did we think about integrating that into the conversation, which is going to be a tough conversation. But just because, this is a life lesson that's important to me too, that I love sharing with people, is just because a conversation or a moment is about to be tough, that's never one of the determining factors of whether we should lean into that conversation or not. Oftentimes, the toughest things are the things that promote the most growth for us.
I totally agree with that. Um, and those conversations can be very scary to have. So it's very easy to be like, I'll do it later. I'll do it later.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
you're
I've been
so
there.
right. No, no, but you're so right because, when those hard conversations happen, you know, um, something happens, right? It's either the thing gets fixed or we move on from the thing, whatever. Like if it's, like even if you're a couple and you're having, you have to have a tough conversation and either we fix whatever is going on or we're not a couple anymore. Or at work, either we fix the issue, you're not arriving to work at time, you're not, doing productivity, or but something's got to happen. And so I know, especially for our neurodivergent listeners, that can be something that's very important to hear because I know it's really easy to push things off for way too long because it's uncomfortable. And so being able to go into it with, with a more positive mindset, a more positive framing, right? Sorry. I just went down like three different tracks in my mind. All right. So I want you to talk to me though. My book is called Overcome Yourself, also this podcast. And one of my biggest lessons, one of my biggest takeaways is gratitude. I had to learn to practice gratitude. So can you tell me what role, if any, gratitude plays in this process of having hard conversations, of changing these seasons of change that we have?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that you mentioned that because gratitude to me is really at one of the it's at the core and it's one of the foundations to what I believe is having a great mindset, one that looks at the world and sees opportunity instead of, you know, circumstances that are either holding us back. And it also creates learning out of challenges and failure, right? So when you have when you choose, I want to, me personally, and how I kind of look at it and share with people when we talk about gratitude, I do think it's a choice. I mean, maybe some
Mhm.
people have a natural proclivity to be more positive. Even then, I think it's still a skill, right? And people can be encouraged by that fact. You can train that. You can you can adopt that mindset, and it might not feel natural at first, but it's just like a habit, right? You're creating those neural pathways to to uh to pay attention to the things that are going to maybe give you that dopamine, right?
Mhm.
And uh when you one thing I used to talk about in terms of still in line with gratitude is when people would fail. That's a great place to see what the culture is of a company or of teams is how do they how do they handle, how do they meet, how do they deal with failure, messing up, mistakes? It can be something super innocuous, like a small admin error. You can tell a lot about the dynamic of how people look at failure just by how someone, a supervisor or manager reacts. Breaking a pint glass on accident or pouring the wrong beer. Um,
Mhm.
and I think the best leaders are at a point where they've done that exercise enough times to where they can look at, hey, this is either me gravitating on, look, you just wasted 16 ounces of beer that we're never going to get back, or hey, look, this is an opportunity for me to slow down, take a moment with this staff member, and I'm going to equip them with the knowledge to pour the best pints of beer for
Yes.
consumers moving forward. Or hey, that admin mistake, if you're in human resources, there's a lot of admin work. There's a lot of compliance to fill out. And I used to work with my admin team on that, on the VP of operations side. And, and there's a lot of deadlines and regulations that you get a lot of mail about. Sometimes you have to kind of follow back up and, work through some errors if an auditor comes in and hits you up. But you can either get stressed, frazzled, or you can say, look, this is an opportunity. Now we have tremendous insight about what that regulation or what that process wants. And you're going to be such a much more effective HR generalist now. And think about this. It's like sometimes these processes are quarterly or annually. You rarely get these learning opportunities. So um, that lesson was just presented to you, take it and become more effective. So that's more of a kind of a practical example of me sharing some things where I think gratitude has and a gratitude mindset has come to light in my practice as well as working with people. And yeah, I think it's just a choice. It's your paradigm and how you choose to look at reality, because that's my last point on that is choice. The idea of choice is so important because all these realities, to me, they're real. If someone looks at it negatively, if someone looks at their life and says it's not that great, if you say that to yourself, a lot of times, enough times.
Well,
Hmm.
what your mind does is it finds evidence. So if you're saying my life sucks, your mind is going to look for evidence that that's true and be like, you're absolutely right, because your mind is a yes man. And it's going to
Yeah,
be like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And it's going to find
yeah.
evidence for whatever you're focusing on. You're 100% correct.
And I love that you mentioned that. And I think that's an important point, Nicole, because like you said, then if that's the case, why wouldn't anyone want to create a life where their brain, their yes person is looking for all the evidence to say, I'm going to be super effective. Success is just around the corner. I'm
Yeah.
going to live a life of impact and provide value to all those I love and care about.
Yes, yes, yes. And then we have to learn though, because to 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 focus on those things on a micro scale, right? And
Mhm,
it's just like
mhm.
you were talking about when you make a mistake, how do you talk to yourself? When your kids make a mistake, how do you talk to them?
Hmm.
Right? Are we focused on putting blame? Oh my God, you're so stupid. I can't believe that you dropped this cup of milk. Like, you wouldn't talk to a 4-year-old like that. Like, not if
Yeah.
you want them to grow up to be healthy and not hate you, right?
Yeah.
You'll be like, uh-oh, we dropped the milk. What do we do? We're
Yeah.
focusing on the solution. Oh, we got to pick it
Yep.
up. All right, we got to get a rag. Let's clean it up. Let's put some soap because we don't want it to get stinky, right? And we focus on solutions. And so I think that's such a good point. And it's not just in the workplace that that comes out, like in school. Like, how are you with yourself? Like, what
Hmm.
what do you say when you make a mistake? Are you beating yourself up, or are you being like, okay, how do we fix this? How do we get back on track, right? And on gratitude, not only do we have to build the neural pathways, there's actually a little section of our brain that is dedicated entirely to gratitude. And if we don't use it, just like any other muscle, it atrophies, like it's not going to function.
Wow.
So the only way that we can build it back up, just like if this muscle atrophied, right? Like if we have it in a cast, what do? You got to work out and you got to get those muscles strong again. Same thing with gratitude, right? And so I think it's such a big deal what you said of the perspective and seeing the opportunities, because that's what I've noticed has happened in my life, and that's the secret that I found. And it's what helped me do the things I needed to do to get better, right? Because I had like a vitamin deficiency,
Mm.
but it was practicing gratitude that said, hey, I'm worth going to the doctor and telling them that this is happening to me. I'm worth getting better. Like, it's worth it. I'm worth it. And it was gratitude that got me to that point, right? And so, even in the smallest, tiniest, whatever you can find, even if it's just the oxygen in the air that I can breathe
Mm.
it, it's the
Mhm.
perfect combination of oxygen, right? We can always find something to be grateful for. And it is a choice that we have to make, even when that little part of our brain is not working like it's supposed to. We still have to choose to say, hey, I'm going to find 3 things. And then little by little, we build it up. And like you said, we build those neural pathways. Um, that's all in my book, too.
I
I
love
talked
that.
about the neural pathways and stuff. So awesome stuff. Like, this is just absolutely amazing, Andrew.
Yeah, and if I could, I just want to add one thing. You
Please.
inspired a thought there. When you said sometimes it can be something as small as being grateful for being able to breathe oxygen, right? Or there being oxygen to breathe
Yeah,
here, right? Like sometimes you do have to, it's like the metaphor, the age-old metaphor that every influencer talks about with getting into fitness or getting hopping back on that fitness wagon if it's been a while. Sometimes you just need to put your shoes and have your gym clothes folded and they're ready.
yep,
Some extreme people I know that are trying to get back on the wagon after a while, they'll sleep in their gym clothes. And that's just the
I've
first
heard that.
act, right? And all these little ways to gamify creating a new habit. It's very interesting, and I think it's awesome that, and I believe in leaning into processes like that are personally going to help somebody. But what you said inspired the main point I wanted to share, which was I believe sometimes people just need to start with a floor, right? Like there's a ceiling and then there's a floor of like what success looks like in terms of in what we're talking about, forming the habit of having more gratitude, showing up with more gratitude. And I think people tend to get a little overwhelmed with the end goal, the end vision. Sometimes it's so audacious and it's like, that I think there's also the part of the brain that wants to protect you from,
Hmm.
a little bit of, looming pain and hardship that's going to come with something like that. But I think if you can establish a floor and say that hitting the floor is also the same thing as me achieving what the ceiling can foreseeably look like too. So let's start with just I can breathe today. And then you'll be having gratitude for some truly audacious things if you just keep going.
Yes. I mean, I remember a time I was having panic attacks every day. So for me, success was going through a whole day without like not breathing.
Mhm.
And for a long time, then finally it happened. I was like, oh my God, that's success. And then my next success was going through a whole day not crying. And then I was able to do that. And so little by little. So now I talk about like getting your book published and getting your podcast, but that's not where it started. It started with I wasn't sad today. For the first time in years, I wasn't sad. I didn't cry. And that for me today is success. And so wherever it is that you're starting, I always encourage my audience, I encourage everyone, what is the smallest denominator, like the tiniest thing that you can find? And then just focus on that and be grateful for that. And then it'll grow. It'll grow and you'll start noticing more. So I love that. I love that so much.
That's huge.
Thank you. Yes. So talk to me about how we can stay in touch with you, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a website where it kind of talks about my backstory, my philosophy, my credentials. You can visit that at www.braveleadershipguild.com. I'm also active on Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is going to be under my personal name, so Andrew Almazan. You can look that up. And there's a links to Brave Leadership Guild there. But outside of that, one thing that is really special to me that I finished recently was I've taken my 15 years of experience in American business so far, and what I wanted to do was compile something free value for people. And it's an ebook, it's a free ebook called The Executive's Playbook for Better Business Execution. It's very intentional in terms of being like a long yarn of a title. I'm in real life, if you ever meet me or on a Zoom chat, I tend to be very verbose, super talkative, and I like my titles to look and feel like that too. But essentially, it's 11 real world business cases that I led, and I take people through a step-by-step roadmap. And essentially, what it is, it's a playbook for people who want to be effective people operations tacticians and change management leaders. So if you have something and you're working in an organization where you're leading your people through significant change initiatives that are having an effect on multiple departments, this is sort of a free ebook that I created to kind of provide a little inspiration from a reading standpoint and then as well as an operation standpoint because we try to make it really simple.
I love that. So you learn about it, but you can also implement it, right?
Absolutely.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrew. This has been wonderful. But before we sign off, I want you to think what is like the biggest, best tip that you give to your clients, to your audience? Like, what is it that one thing that they have to know?
I think I think it's the biggest thing that I tend to tell my clients, people I know is double down on your strengths. Focus on giving yourself the time and the space to think about what those things are. You know, what projects, what project types, what sorts of initiatives in your life tend to bring out like the hungriest version of you, the most passionate, like you've got a fire under you. And start to try to draw a pattern, a through line of what those things are, because I think it takes a little bit of work like that, being very introspective, but then analytical at the same time, because for the most part, we live such a busy life with the modern day. Everything's so fast paced. We're going through the sun and it comes up and the moon comes up just as fast. And it's just this huge
Mhm.
cycle. So slowing down and kind of like trying to find that pattern. And then you can start to build a picture for yourself. If you're somebody who enjoys being a part of an organization, then you can start to lobby that to your supervisors, to your team. Hey, this is how you're going to get the best out of me. If there's a way down the line for me to be paired with projects like this, initiatives like this, leverage my talent. Let's capitalize on what I'm good at. And then if you're an entrepreneur and then you're having a challenge trying to figure out how you're going to make an impact, you can then apply it that same way too. So I think it starts with that. That's a core fundamental is people coming to terms with and reflecting on what are those things that they believe are their passions and their proclivities and doubling down there.
I love that. And I always say, look at what you got in trouble for as a kid. because I always got in trouble for talking. I was too talkative, right? And that's my superpower. So now I get paid to do that. And so lean into, while you're doing your introspection, what was I getting in trouble for as a kid? For being the
I
class
love
clown,
that. Yeah.
for being funny, for being too talkative, for like always daydreaming. Like, what is that? And there's probably something that you love to do there that you just haven't let yourself do. Maybe it's puzzles and you just haven't let yourself do it because you're like, I'm an adult and adults don't color. Yeah, they do. There's adult coloring books and everything, right?
Yeah. No, that's a
So
great one.
thanks. And we're just big kids, right? Like we're just kids who grew up and we still like to have fun. So go have fun.
Totally.
I love that. I love that so much, Andrew. Thank you so much for being here with us. This has been absolutely fantastic. And we will see you guys next time on the next episode of Overcome Yourself, the podcast. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.